Hi everyone! Today we're talking about ESFJs and the different Enneagram types that usually occur in combination with this MBTI type, and basically the differences between these. So we will focus on ESFJ Enneagram 2, 3, 6 and 9 primarily, but I will also mention Enneagram 1 and Enneagram 8. So all about that in the next few minutes. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. So, literally the most common Enneagram type for ESFJs is Enneagram 2. Enneagram 2, as I mentioned in some of my previous videos, like the INFJ and the ISFJ one, very often occurs in combination with FJ types because the description of Enneagram 2 matches extroverted feeling really well. Basically, most ESFJs are Enneagram 2, or at least a very high proportion of them are an Enneagram 2. And I know quite a lot of ESFJs as well in my life. And I would say that about 60%, 70% of them are Enneagram 2. Usually 2ing 3, but sometimes 2ing 1 as well. Now, if we look at this type, we will see the more, let's say, stereotypical ESFJ in the sense that their extroverted feeling hero function will be shown or, let's say, made obvious by the Enneagram 2. We will see an ESFJ that is very much focused on understanding the needs of other people, anticipating the needs of other people, and doing whatever they can to make others happy, to fulfill other people's needs, to care for others, to be generous, to be helpful, to be supportive, and so on and so forth. So basically, we will have a more extroverted ESFJ, probably one of the most extroverted versions of the ESFJ, and also a pretty emotional type in the sense that, Enneagram 2 is part of the feeling triad or the shame triad. And then, of course, we have a feeling dominant type. So we will see this focus on feelings, connections, relationships, and so on and so forth, more so than with other combinations. Of course, ESFJs are extroverted feeling hero types no matter what their Enneagram type is, but in this case, as I was mentioning earlier, it becomes more and more obvious. Now, another pretty common Enneagram type for ESFJs is Enneagram 3. Enneagram 3 is still part of the feeling triad. It's still part of the shame or embarrassment group. But this time, rather than having an individual that is worried that he or she will not be loved by other people, like Enneagram 2 does, an ESFJ Enneagram 3 will be more worried about the possibility of not being worthy, of not being valuable. This is why they will become more competitive, they will become more focused on results, on being very good at what they do, at work, at school, in their hobbies, etc., and might constantly feel the need to prove themselves, to prove their worth, to prove that they are very good or even outstanding in what they do. And of course, an ESFJ 2ing 3 will resonate to this description to a certain extent, but this is even more pronounced, and the anxiety about this topic is even more pronounced in an ESFJ Enneagram 3. I've also noticed that ESFJs who are Enneagram 3s tend to be a little bit more, I don't want to say thinkery, but the way they appear, the way they are perceived by other people might fall into the category, into the direction of being perceived as a thinker. And sometimes they might mistype as ESTJ or another thinking type, but usually ESTJ, because they might confuse this focus on improvement, this focus on performance and results with extroverted thinking. However, they will still be very much interested in understanding the emotional needs of other people, and they will use extroverted feeling much more than any version of TE or TI or whatever. This one will also be a pretty extroverted ESFJ, maybe not as extroverted as an Enneagram 2 ESFJs, and here I mean socially extroverted, not cognitively extroverted, because that's a given. But we will notice a stronger tendency in these two types to express themselves, to want to interact with other people, to have a certain preference for a social status, and so on and so forth. Now, moving on to ESFJ Enneagram 6 and ESFJ Enneagram 9. Both of these tend to appear a little bit less extroverted socially as compared to an ESFJ2 or an ESFJ3. The ESFJ Enneagram 6 will sometimes or might sometimes mistype as an ISFJ because of this introverted sensing properties or characteristics being shown more via the Enneagram 6 tendencies, and the Enneagram 6 tendency to focus on structure, stability, security, finding support outside of themselves, and so on and so forth. So an ESFJ Enneagram 6 will be less focused on their image, on their identity, on portraying a certain image of themselves to the world, because 6 is an Enneagram type that is part of the thinking triad or the anxiety triad. So an Enneagram 6 ESFJ will focus more on securing their relationships, securing things that are happening in their lives, finding support often outside of themselves, even though they might do it unconsciously. And if you ask them, they might not say that, oh, I'm looking for support outside of myself, but they will still really care to find these connections, these ways that will enable them to secure what they have, to make sure that they receive this reassurance from other people that, you know, they're dating or their families or from their coworkers or clients and so on and so forth. And from a social perspective, the Enneagram 6 ESFJ will appear to be more introverted, more interested in spending time with a closer group of individuals, and less likely to have a very, very active social life. And moving on to the Enneagram 9 ESFJ, this one is not as common as the 2, the 3, and the 6, but still a possibility nonetheless, because Enneagram 9 is quite widely spread among the 16 types. I would say it is more obvious and more often found in introverts than in extroverts, and more often found in feelers than in thinkers, but it's not the case. Like, I know people of almost all types who are Enneagram 9, so I feel like mentioning it here as well. So the ESFJ Enneagram 9 will also appear to be more socially introverted as compared to the other types, maybe even more so than the Enneagram 6 one, because this type's focus is on maintaining their inner stability and peace, because this is the main or the core desire of the Enneagram 9. And also this Enneagram type is part of the gut triad. So again, we don't have such a big focus on projecting a certain image into the world like Enneagram 2 and 3 will do. And we also don't have such a strong focus on safety and security, something that we notice in Enneagram 6. So in this scenario, with Enneagram 9, we will notice a slightly more peaceful, more connection-focused ESFJ, who will be more worried about conflicts, who will be maybe one of the least confrontational types of ESFJs, and someone that will constantly try to find this inner balance, this inner peace, this ability to remain consistent, stable, and grounded. And sometimes I would say this type of ESFJ might mistype again as an ISFJ or as another introverted type of feeler, INFP, ISFP, maybe even INFJ. Okay, so despite these 4 types that we often find in ESFJs, I would say that some other possibilities are ESFJ Enneagram 8 and ESFJ Enneagram 1. They're not as common as the other ones, but sometimes they occur. With Enneagram 1, again, we will see a more self-controlled, detail-oriented ESFJ. Again, someone who might appear as more introverted than the other versions of ESFJ. And with Enneagram 8, we will see a very extroverted, outspoken, decisive, and assertive ESFJ. Someone who might, again, similarly to an Enneagram 3, mistype as a ESTJ, as a thinker type. So yeah, do you know any ESFJs? I assume you do. Or are you an ESFJ yourself? If you do, and if you are, I'd be really curious for you to mention what kind of combinations between ESFJ and Enneagram types you came across, and what you maybe picked up or noticed in these pairings. And also feel free to share any other thoughts or comments that you have with respect to these combinations between ESFJ and different Enneagram types. So thanks a lot for watching this video. Thanks a lot for being with me. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next week with another video on typology.